Hi everybody, Curtis Mitch here from the St. Paul Center for Biblical Theology, and welcome back to another weekday reflection on today's Mass reading. Today is Thursday, August 12th. It's my 26th wedding anniversary today. And the Gospel reading is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, verses 21 to chapter 19, verse 1. Now, just a real quick reminder, folks, wherever you're at, wherever you're listening today, please do us the favor here at the St. Paul Center of liking us and following us and subscribing to our channel. And that way we can keep this kind of content coming to you on a regular basis. Now, today's gospel is really all about forgiveness. It's about the Christian duty that you and I have to extend mercy to other people. And when I say it's focused on forgiveness, it's focused on two aspects of forgiveness in particular. Number one, the limits of forgiveness, and number two, the necessity of forgiveness. When it comes to the limits of forgiveness, this is the question that Peter puts to Jesus. How many times? If my brother keeps sinning against me, how many times should I extend forgiveness to him? And then Jesus goes on to tell a parable about the absolute necessity of forgiveness. And it sort of answers this question, well, what if I don't? What are the consequences? How is my relationship with God affected if I don't show mercy to one another, or to those who've personally offended me in some way or another? So let's get into today's gospel, and let's see what lessons are there for you and me. This is Matthew chapter 18, beginning in verse 21. Then Peter came up and said to Jesus, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. Therefore the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. And when he began the reckoning, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his Lord ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the Lord of that servant released him and forgave him his debt. But that same servant, as he went out, came upon one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him by the throat, he said, Pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, Have patience with me, and I will pay you. He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their Lord all that had taken place. Then his Lord summoned him and said to him, You wicked servant, I forgave you all the debt because you pleaded with me. And should you not have had mercy on your fellow servant, as I had mercy on you? And in anger his Lord delivered him to the jailers, till he should pay all the debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you, if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. Now when Jesus had finished these sayings, he went away from Galilee and entered the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. So what's going on here? Let's just break this down into Peter's question and Jesus' parable. Peter's question, how often, Lord, should I forgive my brother if he sins against me? All right, should I forgive him 7 times? No, I think, it seems that in Peter's mind at this point, that 7 times seems pretty generous, doesn't it? Well, imagine forgiving your brother of the same offense committed against you 3 times, and then 4 times, and 5 times. 7 seems pretty generous. But what Jesus reveals to Peter is that he's not generous enough. Right? How many times should we forgive our brother? We should forgive not 7 times, and I think the proper translation here is 77 times. All right? You need to multiply that, increase that. And of course, that's just Jesus' way of speaking like a rabbi always spoke, and that is in terms of hyperbole. There's a certain rhetorical exaggeration that is being made here, so that 77 times means unlimited forgiveness. That's what Jesus is telling Peter. You actually can't put a cap on it. You can't put a limit on it. You must be open-ended. You must forgive in a limitless way your brother. And now the interesting thing here is that Jesus is actually echoing the words that come to us from the Old Testament. Okay, we won't take the time to turn there, but if you looked at Genesis chapter 4, verse 24, you'd read about this unsavory character of the Old Testament in the line of the wicked son of Adam and Eve, the line of Cain. And Lamech, his name is Lamech, and Lamech was a vindictive man. He's also the first bigamist in the Bible, right? The first man to have 2 wives. And he boasts that just because a man injured him, he actually slayed that guy for injuring him. In other words, he's a man of disproportionate justice. He takes vengeance on a scale that is out of proportion to the offense that was taken on him. And then he says, in Genesis 4, verse 24, he says, if Cain is avenged, if anybody should do anything to Cain, and if he's avenged 7-fold, Lamech will be avenged 77-fold. You have this formula of revenge, this formula of vindictiveness that this man from the Old Testament, this sinful man, has pronounced against any who would do him harm. Now, Jesus cites the words of this formula of revenge, but then he transforms it into a formula of mercy, doesn't he? Right? It's not that you should forgive 7 times, but that you should be willing to forgive 77 times. It's an unlimited, open-ended gift. And Jesus will then go on to illustrate what he means by that with this parable, the parable of the unmerciful servant in Matthew 18. And the basic lesson of the parable of the unmerciful servant is that receiving God's mercy obligates us to show mercy to others. It's not simply a gift to receive, it's a gift to receive and then pass on in our own relationships with other people. And the parable works in just a couple of basic steps. You have a royal servant, all right? A king is settling his accounts with his royal servants. And one of these royal servants owes the king an astronomical amount, what is really an unpayable debt. Okay, the gospel writer, Matthew, tells us that he owed him a debt of 10,000 talents. Now, that's very difficult to translate into modern currency with real precision. But it's practically Jesus' way of saying this guy owed the king a gazillion dollars. All right, it's beyond all reckoning. It's not the kind of debt that would actually be a personal debt. It's almost like the kind of debt that a country would carry. All right, a gazillion dollars or something like that. It's literally unpayable for a man in the course of his lifetime to work off this much money. All right, and so what does he do? He falls to his knees and he begs for mercy. And the king in his clemency grants him mercy. But then this very same royal servant, who's just been forgiven in such a generous way, goes out and finds someone who's in debt to him. And we're told that the man who has a debt with him has what is really a very modest debt. It's a very manageable amount of money. The gospel writer, in this case, tells us that he was in debt for 100 denarii. Well, a denarius was about a single day's wage for a field laborer, for a field hand. Okay, so you could be talking about something like a couple $100. And that's the contrast that the parable is drawing out. An unpayable amount of a gazillion dollars versus a couple $100. But he does the same thing, doesn't he? This servant also falls to his knees, begs for mercy, asks for time to repay it. And what happens? Mercy is refused. The royal servant will not grant him mercy. The royal servant wants strict justice for him, even though he received mercy from the king. And so what happens? The king gets word of it, and this unmerciful servant is subjected to a severe judgment because he because he wanted justice for others rather than mercy, he will receive justice for himself rather than mercy. He will be handed over to the jailers until he should pay the last penny. And so what is really the lesson for us? What is Jesus trying to get us to see? He's trying to get us to see that mercy is a gift to be shared. It's something we receive, but it's something that we pass on. It's a grace that comes to us on its way to others. That's the first thing. The second thing is that mercy is conditional, all right? Now, that might make us squirm in our seats a little bit. That's a little bit uncomfortable. You mean it depends upon my willingness to show mercy, that I would actually receive mercy from God? The answer to that question is yes. Jesus taught that earlier on in the Gospel of Matthew. The one little bit of commentary that Jesus gives us on the Lord's Prayer, this is in Matthew chapter 6. In verse 14, that one little explanation that he drives home this one final point, he says, "For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father also will forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." So Jesus is offering us a sober warning here today. This is something we really need to take to heart, okay? That if we refuse mercy to other people, we will receive justice in the end. And justice is not good. We can't have justice because we're sinners. We're too far in debt with God to pay off our debts. And so Jesus says we must be forgiven. In fact, he adds this little prepositional phrase at the end of this that I think is really significant. He says, "So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart." And that's the all-important word. Forgiveness, as Jesus is teaching it, is not a matter of lip service. Okay, this is something that has to come from deep inside, from your heart. It's something that God's grace enables us to do. Sometimes we're wounded too deeply, and we just don't want to forgive, and we don't have the wherewithal to forgive, and so we need to ask for that grace from God, the grace to forgive others, not just with our lips and our words, but from the heart. And so that's really what we want to reflect on today, is that the Lord has forgiven you and me an astronomical debt of sin, a debt that you and I could never pay back, a debt that only the Son of God come in the flesh could possibly pay back. And so in our relationships with others, if we've been forgiven that astronomical debt of sin, how can we not forgive others the much smaller debts that they have toward us? Well, thanks so much for spending time with us today. I pray that God blesses you and your family in your day, and I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Thanks.